Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank Dazzle for again inviting me to build with you all. This is such an awesome, awesome group. I want to thank you all for taking the time to think about some of these issues. I know that you are some of the busiest people in the world, and I know that you could be doing a million other things, but the fact that you are devoting your time and energy to this says a lot about you, your praxis, what counts as important for you, and I honor that. So I want to start with that. So thank you. I also want to just give a shout out to the protocol here. I am amazed at some of the names of some of the people that are in this meeting. Dean Henry, thank you so much for your kind words. I see friends here, Allison, Carolyn, but also Secretary of Education Bunting. Greetings to you. I see Darrell Green, the great Darrell Green. I was just building with him on a call on Monday. It was like he was saying all the stuff that I was ready to say. He had already said it. So Superintendent Green, I see you, I honor you. Thank you for your work, your leadership. Also see Dr. Joseph Jones on here as well. I've been building with some of the folks in the Votex school. So thank you, it's good to see you. So I was asked to come and present on something related to equity, and it took me weeks to figure out what to do, if not months, but this is the approach that I'm going to take: cultivating proactive equity approaches for district leaders during the dual pandemics. This will be the slide, the agenda that'll guide our time together. Adult learners thrive on agendas because you have to figure out where to put your cognitive energy. So I honor that. So this will be the agenda that'll guide our time together. We're going to do a very brief norm setting activity. We'll have an essential question and learning objective review. We're educators, so we got to get our objectives on there. Our students will be able to. I'm going to engage you in what's called the cultural toss activity, which is one of my favorite activities to engage with educators around, based off the work of Gary Howard, where you're going to take a culture that you have and toss it away. And we're going to figure out how that stimulates an understanding of how privilege and penalty operates within our own lives before we discuss how it operates in the lives of our students and in the educators in our buildings. We'll have a break, and then we'll go into a discussion of equity and the dual pandemics. And we're going to do some small group work on equity and the dual pandemics in our schools. Finally, we'll go into a discussion of reactive versus proactive equity leadership and build out some equity visions before our closing, all right? So before we get started with any of the meat, what is the difference between a rule and a norm? Anyone?
My first reaction, Rod, was just journal. Good morning, everyone. This is Darrell. A rule is something that's established, and a norm is something that is generally agreed upon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darrell. Something that is established, meaning that might come from top down. Like so many of you, since you are all at the top, make rules that trickle down into the lives of our children and our teachers as well. Anyone else have an idea about a difference between a rule and a norm?
I would say that a rule is sort of dictated and a norm is sort of accepted more genuinely.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Margie. I agree. Something that is accepted, something that is agreed upon, building on what Darrell was saying. I agree. So what are some norms that can guide our time together? Can anyone just maybe throw out one or two?
I would say let's be open to being challenged and sort of putting current thinking aside, perhaps, or starting to delve into some new thinking.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Franklin. Anyone else? Let me get one more.
I'd say be present during and engaged during the presentation.
Okay.
The work that we're doing, so everybody is here and engaged.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. So what I'm going to do is, I think that what Franklin offered and what Eric offered actually already touch on some norms that I expected for you to to say. I've been doing this for a really long time. I have a different language, but I've already created some norms that I think can guide our time together in the interest of time. But Franklin and Eric already offered norms that kind of speak to what I was already thinking. So let's see. These are some norms that I think we should consider. Mind your speaking to listening ratio. And what that means is that if you feel that you are speaking too much, maybe move into the listening capacity for a while. Because when you speak a lot, that might shut down someone else's willingness to engage and speak. All right. So, but if you think that you are listening too much and not speaking enough, try to move more into the speaking role. Try to challenge yourself to get some ideas out. Somebody might really need to hear from you to build on their own learning. All right. The second one is critique ideas and not people. We're going to be engaging in some really difficult conversations, at least for the most of this, because some of this stuff can be very uncomfortable. And it's important that we understand that we're all learning, and some of us are learning as we're speaking aloud. So let's critique ideas that people say and not people themselves, okay? So if Franklin says something that you don't like, don't say, Franklin, that's terrible. You're terrible for saying that. No. That idea that you said landed a little awkwardly for me, Franklin, if you don't mind. I'm just gonna start like just using all of your names for examples. I hope that you're okay with that. The third one, it is all of our responsibility to make this go. That's one of my favorites, and that kind of touches on what Eric just said. You know, I'm facilitating this, but if you're not engaged, if you're on your phone, if you're doing a million emails, you know, then it's not going to move forward and you're not going to learn anything. We're not going to get anything out of this. So it's all of our responsibilities to make this go. Be respectful at all times, of course. Do not shut down conversations, which kind of touches on what Franklin noted earlier. If you're in a difficult situation, just don't try to walk out and say, I'm not doing this anymore. It's just too hard. No. Try to stay in the conversation. Try to stay in the learning space so that we can move forward. And then instead of accusing others of offenses, if something does come up that is a little bit touchy, use probes. I try to teach my students at UD about this. You know, tell me more about whatever you just said, or when you said blank, what did you mean? Those types of probes allow people a second or third chance to clarify a point that might have landed a little bit harshly or might land a little bit awkwardly. All right, so those are some norms that I think should guide our time together. So if you're cool with these being our norms, just give me a thumbs up in the reactions. Thank you, Carolyn. All right, thank you. I see you. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I am, like I said, I'm a deep pedagogue. So let's be guided by 3 essential questions. The first question that will guide our time together is simply this: how do we intentionally and unintentionally create inequitable learning opportunities for students? And I know you're probably thinking, wow, that is a question of a lifetime. Yes, I do think that, you know, this is a question I would like for us to consider. The second is, what role do the dual pandemics play in exacerbating inequity in my schools or workplace? I realize some of you are actually not working in schools. Some of you are working, you know, you might be working in another capacity, but I want us to think about schools as the institution of focus. And then how can we activate equity proactively instead of reactively? All right, so I've been thinking about this notion of moving from the reactive space to the proactive space, okay? And our bold learning objectives will be this. This is my goal for you all, that when you leave this session at 12 noon today, and that you go off to Panera or to Casapula's or Capriati's to get you a cheesesteak or a sub or something, or Yahtzee's, which is my favorite spot in Union Street, that you will leave with these: a deeper understanding of the role race, culture, and other identities play in affording us privilege or penalty, an understanding of what equity is and how it shows up in various facets of my school or my schools. Some of you have multiple schools that you're in charge of. An understanding of the dual pandemics, which you're probably wondering what I mean by that. I'm gonna tell you about it, and how these further the trauma facing ethnically, racially marginalized students, their families, and staff. I hope that you will leave with an understanding of reactive versus proactive equity mindsets, And I hope that you build deeper community with your fellow educational equity stakeholders. I hope that you simply meet new people here, or if you know people here, that you build deeper connections with them. I hope that you leave with a working document for advancing in proactive equity stance across 10 schooling domains. And I hope that you, I'm gonna leave you with some recommended books to understand race and equity in schools and societies, okay? So those are my objectives for our time together. Now you're like, yo, those are mad ambitious. Yes, they are. And I'm gonna do the best I can to cover all of these. And if I don't get them all, then, you know, actually, I'm gonna get through all of these, I promise you. I don't know how, but I will. All right, so let's go. I'm gonna begin with this activity. It's called the culture toss. These are the goals. I'm gonna give you the goals up front. The first goal is to provide an experiential understanding of personal culture. All right, this comes from Gary Howard. Gary Howard is one of the most amazing equity workers in working in education today. He is a white ally. He is awesome. He is an old school multiculturalist advocate. He was at Martin Luther King's speech, all that stuff. He is amazing. And a lot of this work, I was inspired by his work to adapt it for you all today. I've never done this with school leaders, so I'm gonna try. I hope this lands okay. But the first thing is to provide an experiential understanding of personal culture. The second goal of the culture toss is to create an awareness of the ways that power, privilege, and oppression can impact personal identity. Okay, power, privilege, and oppression, and how it impacts personal identity. The third goal of the culture toss is to demonstrate the concept of negotiating identity. And I want you to play with this notion of what that means and what it looks like for not only yourself, but also your school, the schools that you work for. And lastly, I want this activity to afford you the opportunity to reflect on the ways that school culture can cause some students to not bring their whole selves to the classroom and into the buildings, okay? So these are the goals of the culture toss, all right? Are you ready? All right. So I want you to think about how you identify yourself in 6 different ways, okay? 6 windows into who you are. What makes you who you are? What makes you you? What feels true to you? And there's no right or wrong in this, but I want you to kind of bound this within 6 domains. I'm gonna show them to you in a second, so hold off on what you're gonna do. The assumption, of course, is that you're all human, all right? So you don't have to add that one, all right? But let's look at this. I want you to do this in the chat, okay? If I can find it. I just loaded what I'm going to call your virtual handout. Now, this is how I've been working with my undergrads at UD. I create these virtual handouts for students. Now, let's see if you can click on this. So I'm going to need some. You got to be generous with me. Hopefully it opens up. Okay, terrific. That virtual handout will guide our entire workshop. Okay, that's also your little, if there was like a brochure or something that you would leave with, that's it right there. Okay. Under and on that virtual handout, you will see that listed is the goals of this activity. I want you to go down to it and click on your copy of the cultural toss and equity model. Can you click on that and give me some thumbs up once you landed on that? All right, Mark, I got thumbs up from Mark. I got thumbs up from Carolyn. Thank you. Thank you. Jackie's hitting me with thumbs up. So you mean to tell me that this worked? Yes. All right, terrific. What I want you to do is I want you to think about what makes you, you. So I want you not to type on that virtual handout. That's for everybody. Type on the copy, okay? Type on the copy. Okay, good. I see Carolyn is shaking her head. Carolyn, I need you to, you're gonna send me good vibes, okay? So click on that. I want you to focus on these 6 domains, all right? So let's think about it. I will before you do that, let's talk through my own, all right? As I was preparing for this, I was thinking of some ways that I could maybe bring a little bit of myself into it, and I found this awkward picture, all right? So race and ethnicity. So I am African-American. I am Black, but I am a descendant of enslaved Africans in the US. So my people, I know that my people are traced back to Mali, but my lineage is of Eastern Shore Negroes who came to Wilmington, like a lot of other Black folks came to the East from the Eastern Shore, okay? I was often one of the few Black kids and things like swim team. So that's me. I'm gonna give you about 10 minutes to find me in that picture. I know it's gonna be really hard to find me in that picture on the right. And this might be some of you, I'm not sure. Like I'm actually old enough, I don't know. All right. Or if you know any of these people, this picture just came up on timelines. I have to share this. I was often one of the few Black kids in things like swim team, because my mother was like, I need to give you something that you can do for the rest of your life, like swimming. And they don't do a lot of that, you know, the Walnut Street Y. So I had to go to the Brandywine to do that. And I want us to think about how race plays into our identities, okay? There's other levels to this, okay? I see a teacher in CSD right off the bat. Don't see Coop though. Coop, I don't think had worked there yet, Dan Shelton, okay? I'm not sure. I feel like he might have come after or before this picture was taken. But that's fascinating, Dan Shelton, I knew it. This is Delaware for you. I'm from Delaware, by the way, all right? The next thing, language. Okay, list all the languages that you speak fluently, including dialects, regional, or other multi-dimensional combinations if they are true for you. So me, I speak American English. I have a mid-Atlantic accent, and I think that's important. I have a novice Spanish language. I also speak a little Portuguese because I went to Mozambique and I taught there for an entire summer after I graduated from college. So let's think about your languages. The next box I want you to fill in is think about your religion or spirituality. Your religious membership. How do you relate to religion? How do you engage the spiritual world? Then I want you to think about your life value. What are some of the things that you value? Lifelong learning, service, serving youth. For me, also financial security, my family. I'm a new father. I love art. So put something in that box. And then for you all, your vocation, and this should be easier for you because you're educators and it's the best vocation. All right, it doesn't matter if you're a para-educator or sitting in an office advocating for money for education, it's all education. So, but what is your vocation? You know, what is your calling in life? Why are you here? And then lastly, something that you own that is dear to you that you couldn't live without. The last thing that you give up, like a family album, your home, a personal item. All right, so I want you to fill that out. All right, do we have it filled out? I see some thumbs up. All right, got another thumbs up, got another, yep, thank you. All right, thank you, let's see another thumbs up. All right. So now that we all have this filled out, now I want you to imagine something, and I know this is going to be a little bizarre, but just go there with me. Okay. I want you to imagine, friends, that we now live in a police state. Okay. It's an oppressive environment. Actually, this really shouldn't be hard for us to do anymore. I don't think that we envisioned it like this, but we live in an oppressive environment now, okay? It's dangerous to be who you are, okay? All of the identities that you listed could be targeted for police violence. People are watching, people are listening, people are being arrested, people are being taken away, and people are disappearing, okay? And your main goal is simply this: survival, okay? In order to survive, you have to give up 2 boxes. So you're like, well, what does this mean? Okay. Well, if you give up race and ethnicity, you deny your racial identity. You can't benefit from it, can't talk about it, you can't celebrate it, you can't deny part of it, whatever. You can give up your vocation, you can give up your possession, you can give up your language. which means that you will lose the ability to speak the languages that you listed, the languages of your homeland, the languages of your ancestors, okay? You give up your spirituality. You can still hold your beliefs, but you need to go underground, and you can never be found practicing. You can believe in your life values, but you have to stuff it away. So what I want you to do is I'm going to send you to breakout rooms, but I want each person in the room, all right, first of all, introduce yourself. And if you don't know that person, send them your email and say, hey, let's do like 10-minute, 15-minute coffee or something so we can get to know each other. We can build. I want y'all to get to know each other real good. You're probably like, this is Delaware, we all know each other, but you know, just in case you don't, you know, what did you cross off and why? Right? Well, I want you to remember our norms before we get deeply into this. So mind your speaking to listening ratio, critique ideas and not people. It is all of our responsibility to make this go. But I want you to be respectful. Try not to shut down conversations. I want you to really focus on listening to each other. And as you discuss, for what if you're sharing, what two did you cross off and why? Why these 2 boxes instead of any others? Okay, so don't just say I crossed off these, but think about why did you cross off these? I'm willing to give up these 2, but not these others. And if you're listeners, try to understand why others made the choices they made and try to understand how each person entered into this exercise, okay? Does everyone understand the goal of the discussion? All right, I see head nods, I'll take it, all right? So I'm gonna send you to some breakout rooms and I'm gonna give you about 7 minutes to discuss in your partnerships. Remember, introduce yourself, build community, and off you go. All right, fantastic. Dan Shelton, which 2 did you give up and why?
I gave up, I'm on mute, thank you. I gave up race and ethnicity, and I gave up religion and spirituality. Did you say why?
I did, yeah, I'm curious.
So the why was based actually more on your, I'll call it definitions of what it means to give them up.
Okay.
So for religion, spirituality, I think the most important part of that is faith and your own personal connection.
Mm.
So I could give up going to church. I couldn't have given up faith. I could give up going to church. So I did it more based on your thing. If it had been, you have to give up the whole idea, I might have chosen a different order.
No, it's things you got to suppress in many ways. You know, you can't give it up. Yeah.
And the
That's
second
great.
one was race. And as you know, a white male, I don't think I define myself that way ever. But then again, I have the privilege maybe to not have to. So maybe after I give it up, I wish I had it back, but I would give it up.
Dan, thank you so much. Those insights are really appreciated. Thank you. Again, when we're thinking about this activity of things that we have to give up, things that we have to let go of, culture toss it away. And we think about this. There's some things that we can suppress, some things like spirituality, we can go inward. There's a lot of people who've had to do that. But there's some other things that you just can't. But friends, unfortunately, the police state is intensified. Okay, there's more pressure on the street. Okay, increased surveillance, there's increased intensity. And for the safety of those and for those around you, I'm gonna ask you to give up 2 more boxes. And interestingly, oppressive environments, especially schools, work in this way. Increased surveillance, increased intensity, all right? So I'm gonna give you an opportunity to discuss in small groups, why would you give up those 2? Why did you cross off these 2? Remember our commitments again, all right? Why these 2 boxes instead of any of the others? Why did you keep the 2 boxes that are left? And for those of you who are listening, try to understand why others made the choices they made and try to understand how each person entered into this exercise, all right?
I'm not
I'm gonna
even
give you
looking at it yet. I'm in the middle of this till
another few
lunchtime.
minutes, all right? I'll see you. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Would anyone like to share which two they gave up and why?
I'll share.
Thank you so much.
So this is really tough. I gave up English because, I think I could probably learn another language. And there was a time when people communicated before they had organized language. So I think I could, meal around and kind of make it out. The other thing was, and this was really tough, like I gave up being Black or African-American. And at the beginning, I thought absolutely not. But when I looked at the choices, spirituality is who I definitely am as the core. I don't care about the religion part, but the spirituality I need to keep. And I need to keep service to others because that's why I'm here on this earth. And, so I gave up being Black because maybe, we're really just human at the core. So I could give that up if I absolutely had to.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, that's Vienna. Thank you, Vienna. Thank you so much. Very, very, very powerful. Yes, thank you, Joseph, for noting that. Anyone else want to share?
Roderick, this is, I think in the context of the exercise, the life value and the language were the next two.
Okay.
Because in essence, I can't strip myself of who a police state or oppressive state would see me as, which is the man who I am. And the first thing that I ended up, one of was possession was a Bible, but then spirituality is who I am. It's the faith, to Vienna's point. And that's ultimately what I would be left with. And this exercise, kind of lends itself to, in the end, we can only be who we are, and, and how the world ultimately sees us when we're stripped down from things that we hold dear, such as possessions and work. And obviously this year from a pandemic is indicative of that, when so many things that we held dear to us. I do value my family, but I literally haven't seen my parents in a year. Thankfully, I've just been vaccinated and we'll have the opportunity to, but that's something that I value. But in this context, I wasn't able to see them. So my race and ethnicity and spirituality were the two boxes that I was left with.
Thank you. Thank you, Darrell. So Darrell has already offered it and put us in the reflective space, but I want us to give us an opportunity for you to think about this on your own for 2 minutes. What did you learn about yourself during this activity? What did you notice that reinforced something that you already knew about yourself? What did you choose to put in the boxes? What did you give up, keep, and why did you do that? And I want you to really think about that as we kind of move into our final breakout group. Actually, we're going to do 2 more breakout groups, but I'm going to give you just a minute to reflect on that on your own, and then I'll send you one more time, and then we'll go into our wrap up of this activity. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute to really think about these questions. I'm sorry, there's actually 2 more breakouts, but think about this first. All right, in the interest of time, let's do this as a large group and then we'll do one more small group. Does anybody want to share one thing you learned about yourself, one thing you noticed, and one thing you learned about the group? Thank you, those of you who are sharing, appreciate you. Thank you, those of you who are chiming in on the chat. I appreciate the dialogue. Anybody want to share something?
Roger, this is Joe. One thing I would add, I don't know, I just couldn't help this thought continue to come in my mind with the police state and with, what we're going to release is, would I be willing not to release it? So I know the activity and I haven't always been the best student, but my mind went, you challenged me to go differently. Like, would I actually fight for my faith? You know, would I actually stand up if I'm really a person of value that believes, and I wrote down here as a vocation, is opportunities for others? Would I fight for that? And that struck me. And I know there's no clear answer to that. And I hope never to be put in that position, just for the record, you know, but my mind did go there. Like, could I stand up for my faith? Could I stand up for my family? Would I? And there has been countless examples throughout history where people have been put in that position. And that was a major undercurrent of thought that I just could not shake throughout the whole activity.
Roderick, if I could.
Brilliant insight. Thank you. Yes,
Roderick,
James?
if I could piggyback off of Joe's statement, and I shared it in both breakout sessions with my group, I really struggled with the framing around surviving. And I say that because all those other things, 5 of the 6 boxes I could give up, and whoever these police or people who were out to get me would not know whether I did or didn't. But giving up my race makes me survive. But I found myself holding on to that just because of that. And so I'm not sure if I'm framing it right, but the one thing I learned about me is that I don't think you can change who I am because you tell me I can't be, by giving up those other 5 things. And my notice of the context changes your answer, right? Like when you said, the first slide said, in order to survive. And for me, in order to survive, the first thing that I should have given up was being Black, because that's the only thing that people can know about me just by looking at me and me not saying a word. And so that context was important. And then the thing I noticed about the group was, even though the answers were different, it all got back to who we are as a people, and that who we are as people is the most important thing.
Thank you, James. Brilliant insights. Brilliant insights. I'm gonna ask that we hold the complexity. I have another hand raised. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, building on that, I kind of came at it from a different viewpoint. It's the one thing I don't have the ability to change. I can give up my culture, but that's not my race, right? If I'm saying race is a physical attribute, I have no way of giving that up, right? Without undergoing some pretty serious medical procedures, right? So it's would I give up my culture, my culture linked to my race? Yeah, but can I even give up my race?
Yeah.
That's something that you can change.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna send you to small groups one more time, and then we're gonna discuss this notion of negotiating identity, because this is exactly what you've already been talking about. It's fascinating how you landed right here, through what Darrell was saying, through what Deanna was saying, through what James was saying, through what Amelia and Joseph were saying. Thank you. How do we put forth or give up within the environments in which we operate? I know you're like, why are you holding this? This complexity is I'm trying to push you into thinking about what it means to go to a school, to work in a building where you have to give up facets of your identity, to hide facets of your identity, to silence parts of self in order to reap the capital that comes with coming to this school. And that's what happens a lot for children. So let's think about the ways that power and privilege play into the identities that we give up. So I'm gonna give you 3 minutes to talk about this, and then we're gonna talk about how this applies. I'm sorry to cut you off. Every single group, none of you came back before my timer ran out. So I'm gonna let that discussion ride one more time, but I'm gonna give you some things that I've been thinking about. Like, I love this picture of this Black girl, like on the right here, looking at this teacher. How do our students, what do they have to give up? How do students in our schools experience pressure to give up aspects of their own identities or not be who they fully are? Within adult-student relationships, within peer and peer relationships. And these aren't rules. Like, I know that there's no rules that are governing this, but these are the norms, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to create some norms with you. These are the invisible fibers of our buildings that guide the logics of our schools, that create the peril that these kids navigate. And it's up to the equitable-minded school leader to interrupt this. How do our students navigate these types of these challenges? Because in many ways they are living in somewhat oppressive states. And I know that you don't think about it like that, but some of our kids, they play this game daily. I'm a little bit too dark. I'm too light. My language skills aren't where they need to be. This teacher honors my cultural heritage. This one doesn't. So I can be a little bit more Latinx in this classroom, but not in this one. Or this administrator I can go to, but not this other one. And some students never have to play this game because of various facets of their identities, which are deemed as acceptable, as normal, as privileged. All right. So I'll give you another couple minutes just to go through this, because I think, you all were definitely in there, in that space. But how are students in our district, in my school, in my classroom, feeling pressure to not be who they are? To what extent are we creating pressure for children not to bring their full selves to the classroom, not valuing their full identities? What role do I play as a leader? And you all are the leaders of leaders, all right? And not valuing students' identities. And what role can I play to create greater equity so that these students can bring their full selves to the school? All right, I'm going to give you a break in 10 minutes, but I want to make sure that I'm going to give you another 3 minutes to discuss this. We're going to come back and review, and then we'll take a break. All right, so go into the inquiry space just for another 3 or 4 minutes to continue your conversations, and I'll see you back in about 3 minutes. Wow, wow, wow. No one came back early. Amazing.
We needed
Thank
more
you.
time. We needed more time.
I know, I'm sure, I know you did. I know you did. Frank, thank you so much for that. How about this? Does anyone want to share something interesting that came out? I just want 2 people to share. I want to challenge someone to share who hasn't shared yet.
I'll share it because I just want to thank my breakout teammates for a very brave conversation. So, we ran into a situation that was, where we were sort of having to clarify each other's statements and each other's position. And I think, thankfully, for that last breakout session, we were able to get that sort of cleared up. But I think that's an example of some of the tough conversations that we all need to have. They're not always going to be nice, and I think sometimes there's misunderstandings, but it's important that, thinking back to the norms that you set for us, Roderick, is that just clarifying, not attacking the person, but sort of, let's understand, I need to understand what you just said. So I appreciate the conversation that I had with my breakout group.
Thank you so much, Margie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Brilliant insights. Anyone else? Anyone else want to share something?
I can share.
Thank you.
So we talked about just this, even in the curriculum that we deliver to our students, being more culturally responsive in delivering curriculum, because if we have students that are constantly learning about people that don't look like them, but are only get that kind of exposure during Black History Month, or but not showing that it's all history. Everybody's a part of history. It's not just a dominant culture. So I think that sends a big message to our students of what we're learning and delivering in the classrooms.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So it's interesting. Eric is kind of touching on something that we'll visit after break, is this notion of this curriculum as a site where for equity to that's only one site though. Black History Month is a site of curriculum, but there's also other things, including community relations, school culture, assessments, everything. All right. So, all right, friends, because you're educators, I also think it's important to do a review. So this is the purpose of the culture toss. Provide an experiential understanding of personal culture to create awareness of the ways that power, privilege, and oppression can impact your own personal identity, to demonstrate the concept of negotiating identity, and to reflect on the ways that school culture can cause some students to not bring their whole selves to the classroom. I want to thank you for engaging in that activity. It's a very brave activity. You all activated it with just remarkable insights, precisions. You challenged it, you pushed it, you massaged it, given your own interests, and that's exactly what I wanted you to do, and I hope that you gained something from it. So cheers to you. So let's take a quick break, but I'm gonna give you a preview for what's next. So we'll take a break, but what's coming up is we're gonna investigate equity. What is equity? We're gonna talk about the dual pandemics. What are the dual pandemics? And then we're going to talk about what role the dual pandemics play in exacerbating inequity occurring in your schools or your workplaces. All right. So that's what we're going to take off. So it is now 10:26. Let's come back at 10:36. There's a challenge for you. Not 37, 36. All right. All right. Thank you. All right, welcome back. It's good to see you. I see some of y'all chewing on something. I hope that's a piece of fruit. Not that donut. Told y'all not to get that donut. I'm just joking. It's good to see all of you. All right, so we're going to be moving into our next part of our time together. I'm really excited about this section because it's going to really have you thinking about the role of equity in your own school, in your own building. But before we do that, I want folks to put in the chat one sentence of what equity, what it means and what it looks like, all right? What does equity mean? What does it look like? One sentence on what it means, one sentence on what it looks like. Just throw it in the chat and don't be afraid to be the first person that throws it in the chat. All right, thank you, Tamara or Tamara. Leveling the access, yep. Yes. Access to what you need. Yep, access is coming up. Yep. Good. And we all know they are a priority and treated as such. Thank you, Mark. Minimizing harmful practices. I think that is definitely a part of it. Eric, thank you. Meeting needs, Jay, thank you. Now, what does it look like? Give me an example. You're telling me what it means. Give me an example of what it looks like. How do you know you have equity? Providing access to necessary resources. Absolutely, James. I think that's actually the best definition. That's the one that I'm about to show you. James over here trying to take my job. Go, James. Paul, yep. Equity is the intentional access for all. All students, particularly the marginalized underrepresented, getting what they need. Absolutely, Carolyn. Amelia, opportunity provided many ways. Yep. Frank, looking at access and outcomes, varied resources, depending on the need. Yes, Tara, very important, Tara. You vary the resources depending on the need. You don't just give everybody the same thing. Students getting what they need based on where they are in the learning journey. Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Margie. Looks like, absolutely, Dan. Differentiating support, materials, learning opportunities, methods so everyone can accomplish the goal are provided. Absolutely, give them what they need. Meeting students where they are, creating, developing agency. Yes, Joseph. Love the developing agency part. We always forget about that. We think we're just giving, but students can build themselves. Fairness or justice in the way people are treated. Yes, thank you, Mark. Yes, Paul, there are no barriers to access or progress for any student. That's what an equitable school would look like. Optimal outcomes for all, regardless of background. Yeah, I think that if we got equity right, that might be the case. Equity is joyous. Come on, Margie. You better. A sense of belonging and deserving amongst all. Thank you, Amelia. Absolutely. All those things are tied to what equity is and what it looks like. Thank you for those of you who chimed in on the chat. I appreciate your insights. Thank you. Yep, Ned, provide everyone with the opportunity to succeed, provide support. Yep, to make that happen. Absolutely. Great. This is the definition. This is kind of how I think about equity, and it's complicated. But I like to live in the complex space because I think that when we try to cut and dry everything, we miss the nuance. So you've already got it. It's creating the conditions to ensure that all have access to the resources needed to achieve their academic and social best. And I think it's important that we think about both the academic components, but also the self-concepts, the self-esteem, the identities that we are building within school spaces. As a researcher, I don't really focus as much on the academic outcomes. I actually focus on the self-concept. All right. When we think about their social best, I'm much more interested in some of those domains than the academic. And I think that We focus a lot on the academic domains because that's what's counted, but we don't focus enough on how kids are feeling about their selfhoods. And I think that that's very important. So less is more difficult to assess that, but that's important to think about. It is not equality, not giving everyone the same thing. Doing so would not create the conditions that would help all achieve their academic and social best. And there's different types of resources that we can give them. It could be money, it could be time, it could be human resources, it could be curriculum. And it's important that you realize that some students have easier access to these resources. And what we want to do is we want to think about what are some of the ways that we can afford some of those resources to kids that don't have some of those opportunities, so that we can create greater access and through equity. I liken it to this notion of stretching. This is an idea that I actually emerged from a workshop I was doing about maybe 7 or 8 years ago at the Park School in Baltimore. And this teacher, and I really wish I could remember her name, but when I was asking like, give me a metaphor for equity, and she likened it to stretching. And I just thought that has stayed with me. She's like, equity is stretching. And I can tell that my classroom is inequitable if I am too comfortable as a teacher. And I said, well, tell me more about that. She's like, I have to stretch to meet the needs of my students, because if I'm not stretching, that means that they have to stretch extra hard to get the information that I'm trying to convey. And I said, whoa, that is a marvelous, marvelous metaphor for what equity really is. It's stretching to meet the needs of all students. It's not just saying, I'm just going to give you what's in my arms reach. I'm going to stretch and do everything I possibly can in order to make sure that you have what you need in order to be successful, okay? The other thing I want to focus on, and this is a point of departure from some researchers, but I do believe this to be true. Equity isn't a destination, but it's an unwavering commitment to a journey. So there's no such thing as arriving at equity, okay? And there's certainly no such thing as staying at equity. And the reason I say that is because we are all living in an unjust, inequitable society, and we are constantly trying to unlearn things, undo things that we were taught. We are doing the best we can with unequitable resources, given our race, all those things that we talked about earlier during the cultural toss. All of those things contribute to our identities that have afforded us power in some ways, and privilege in others, and also penalty in those domains. As a result of that, we are constantly in this negotiation. What do I let go of? What do I advocate for? Who do I advocate for? And it's never something that you just land at and stay there. It's constantly shifting because the means and modes of life are shifting. So equity is a destination. It's not a destination, it's something that you're constantly working on. People are like, yo, Rod, you're an equity expert. And I guess, I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. And the only reason I'm comfortable with it is not because I have went to Equity University and I've gotten all the equity degrees and I've been crowned with equity. No, it's just that I think about this stuff more than the average person. I'm constantly thinking about equity. I'm thinking about it in my engagement with my students, my engagement with you, in my writing. And I want you all to do that. I want you to engage in equity work, okay? Before we start pushing into what equity means in this moment, this crazy moment that we're living in right now, this bananas moment, I want us to think about where we have been in our schools and our districts with regards to equity. So I want you to go to the virtual whiteboard. And I want you on that virtual whiteboard, the virtual whiteboard, I'm sorry. Go to the participant handout that's on there. And I want you to look at that chart that I created. And I want you to reflect on, where was equity in your district before the pandemic? All right. So I need have you found the handout with the chart? I just need a couple of head nods or something to let me know you got it. All right, good. Thank you, Eric. So that you can expand that document, whatever. Just focus on the first column. Don't even look at the second and third one yet. Focus on where was equity in your district, in your building, in your school, in your workplace before the pandemic. I want us to focus on that. All right, I'm gonna give you a while to focus on this. I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to work on it, and I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to talk about it with your colleagues, okay? So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to work on it, and then I'm gonna send you into new breakout rooms so that you can discuss this with your colleagues. Okay? So focus on that first column only. Thank you. Let's see you hard at work. I'm gonna give you 1 more minute to finish up trying to think about equity in those 10 domains. I know it's a lot to go through. I'm gonna send you to your group soon. All right, so when I move you to your rooms, give everyone opportunity to share some of the elements of equity. If you can't get through everything, just focus on a few of the domains that you think are most salient, okay? So I'm gonna move you now. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Another fantastic conversation, friends. I know I cut you off. Let's have a lot to go through, and I want to make sure that we have time. Does anyone want to share something compelling that came out of your discussion? This is a general scope. Where was equity before the pandemic? Who wants to share?
I can share this time.
Thank you.
So for us as a group, all 4 of us were at the threshold of really taking equity seriously. And what I mean by that is as districts really starting to do that careful look inside as to what equity was and what equitable practices were, and beginning to establish those. Many right up till the week of the pandemic and closing, and all of us have retooled during the pandemic, but I believe in all 4 cases that the foundations of awareness were there prior to, and so it made some of the pandemic conversations that will come, I think, later in the next 2 columns here. I think we'll see some building because there was foundations in all 4 places.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I don't have your name here. I'm sorry. Who is this?
I'm Paul.
Hey, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate. Yeah. Many of you probably already have a tremendous amount of foundations. Does anyone else have to want to share what they emerged from their group? Thank you so much, Paul, for volunteering. Don't be afraid. Anyone. Amanda, Bridget, James, Kelly, somebody from that group 7.
I was trying to allow my other partners to share. I was using my radio/listening ratio.
Ratio to speaking to listening. Come on, James, you better listen. I appreciate it. Yes, good. But go ahead, since no one else feels like
it looks like Amanda's going to step up.
Well, I was going to, but then you can take it away, James.
No, Amanda, the floor is yours.
Go ahead, Amanda. Thank you.
Sure. I think pre-pandemic, and Kelly and I kind of shared the same the same history. We were really starting to do the truly difficult work. We look really good on paper. Scores are great. Our kids are performing well. We rank high in the state. But when we really look at the opportunity gap and what we're really doing for our most vulnerable learners, that's where we had been diving in to really address those supports and needs and strengths in that area. So, and then going into the pandemic, obviously that has just become even more of a focus. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Amanda. I appreciate it. I love how you're using language of opportunity and you're delving into these issues. It sounds like all of y'all were ready to do equity right before the pandemic started, and then the pandemic came, and then it kind of steered your ship a little bit. And that's in many ways, and that's an opportunity of itself. I'm on the board of YMCA Camp Takla. If you can imagine, a residential summer camp that had no campers, no staff. We had no camp program. We lost $1 million, and talk about a rebuilding year. So I think that in many ways, we're all kind of grappling with this. But I do think it's important that we think about the fact that there was not just one pandemic, but there was two. Somebody said 3, 4, but let's talk about this as dual pandemics. Okay. COVID-19 was met incredibly viscerally by systemic and extrajudicial anti-Black violence during the summer and late spring of 2020. Racism generally exacerbated the impact of COVID-19 on the physical and mental well-being of the Black community, and it furthered the trauma the Black community faced due to pervasive inequities in health, social services, wealth, and educational opportunities. As a result, what we're seeing is that a lot in social scientists are starting to reference this as actually dual pandemics. I would say that there are triple pandemics if you talk about maybe what was going on in California with the wildfires. You can say quadruple pandemics if you talk about other issues that we're facing. But I would say that the main thing is the fact that this pandemic was met with the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and also Breonna Taylor, which have made it such that Black folks are reminded in many ways that they do not matter. So let's think about what just happened this past year, not just the social, the health pandemic, but also this extrajudicial killing. And also let's think about this through the lens of how it traumatized. Trauma is one of those things that has often been used to understand the body in hospitals, bodily trauma. But let's think about the ways that what happened this past summer and what continues to happen to not only the Black community, but also the Latinx community through xenophobia and jingoist, which is this extra patriotism that has been kind of fueling this keep them at the border mentality, but also our Asian American students who are now being reminded of the terror that is plaguing them and their community as well as a result of domestic white terrorism. All right, there's all kinds of things. And so I basically want to think about this through the lens of COVID-19, but also the trauma that has wrought on racialized minorities. That is the dual pandemics. So what is this notion of trauma, okay? It's an outcome related to threats, high stress, danger, and it comes from cumulative experiences, pervasive harmful conditions. And my colleague Adam Alvarez, who's a professor at Rowan, is a really big scholar on trauma. He studied it quite a bit, particularly how it relates to education. But trauma is also a racialized phenomenon. And Black and Latinx children particularly are exposed to various trauma sources at incredibly high levels. And this trauma sources do not just necessarily come from living in higher needs communities, but also comes through interpersonal violence, mispronouncing people's names, commenting on people's bodies or their hair texture or how they smell or the food that they eat or these various things that they have in the backgrounds of their Zoom classes. All of that type of stuff adds to the interpersonal racist violence that children suffer. It also can, of course, emerge from exposure to violence, abuse, ecological stressors, like growing up in places where there's food deserts, generally racism and xenophobia. And it also can be a predictor in how it relates to academic and behavioral issues in school settings. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to it. And what we need to really keep in mind, friends, is that I know that you all have been thinking about this because you've been navigating your districts through the choppy waters that have been caused by the COVID-19. But also you need to think about this through the lens of how COVID has related to what I've been calling Black trauma, all right? So COVID-19 stress, this is the worry of contracting the virus, worry, loss of jobs and income, the stress of family members contracting the virus. Not only that, but the grief from losing family members and how all of that can tax the mental capacity and cognitive functioning of children and the parents who are positioned to care for them. And not only just parents, but also family members, godparents, uncles, aunts, grandparents. And I think that image on the right there is really, really telling. There's also virtual learning that's kind of happened at the same time of virtual work. Many home environments were not prepared or able to provide a comparable learning environment for children. In the most recent data that I could find was 66% of Black households in the US had home broadband service in 2019. All right. So only 66%. So the internet was limited. But not only that, but only 45% of Black Americans owned a desktop or laptop computer in 2015. That data is a little bit old, but I can't imagine that it's that much higher. Without access to the internet or a computer, Black parents were at a disadvantage in educating their children. And as you can see on that picture up there, we have like the oldest sibling who's on a laptop, but the two younger siblings are on phones. You know, and what that means is that they're not able to access things as equitably as students who may have a laptop. And I know some districts have provided various things for students, but others may not have done so. So just to keep that in mind. I found this quote that I thought was really compelling. Some people have called this the dual pandemic. Some other folks have called this a pandemic within a pandemic, okay? So Black Americans are disproportionately suffering from a set of dual ills: the novel coronavirus and systemic racism. Evidence shows Black Americans are more likely to fall sick from or die from COVID-19. Concurrently, they are also more likely to die from police brutality. I'm gonna read that again. Concurrently, they are also more likely to die from police brutality. These are just two symptoms of the systemic racism that has disadvantaged Black Americans for hundreds of years. And when I say that, we're not only, and I say we because I'm Black, I'm a Black American, I'm actually a Black American male man who has watched people who look like, sound like, dress like, walk like me with hairstyles like me get gunned down in the streets, and I've had to watch teenage boys get killed in the same ways. That type of experience does not only relate to me because, you know, as a person, I haven't directly been shot down, of course, but it traumatizes me every time I have to engage with an image of a Black body taken. All right. And if it pains me that way, it also pains our boys, our mothers, our fathers who have to constantly be re-traumatized by what they're seeing. And friends, what I'm saying is that I know that you are all dealing with logistics and your buildings, all that, but keep in mind the amount of trauma, particularly that is suffered upon the Black community during this time period, and how that trauma can motivate more equity in our buildings. One other point, I'm currently engaged in the Black Boy Mattering Project, which is a unique school partnership research study. I have a group of Black boys that I work with at a school in Delaware. And the things that they're telling me about what they experienced this past year, they're just like, we want a place to process this. We want a place where we can talk about what we've been seeing, what we've been experiencing. They're seeing these killings, they're seeing these protests. Friends, Black Lives Matter is now, according to New York Times, the largest social movement in the history of the world. I'm going to say that again. Black Lives Matter is the largest social movement in the history of the world, larger than women's suffrage, larger than the civil rights movement, based on how many people protested between May and June, in person and virtually. All right. This is the time. If you are not thinking about Black Lives Matter in your equity mindsets with regards to how you're advancing equity in your district, you are now ahistorical. Okay. You're not doing what we should be doing. Okay. This is not an ancillary movement. This is the social justice civil rights issue of our time. Okay. So I want you to think about that. And you're like, well, Rod, what about other students? Yes, I understand that. Dig. COVID-19 and Latinx trauma. Let's think about this, particularly through the lens of the economic ramifications for what it did for our Latinx brothers and sisters. The unemployment rate for Hispanics or Latinxs increased from 4.8% in February of 2020 to a peak of 18.5 before dropping to 14.5 in June. So a lot of Latinx folks have lost their jobs, okay? This exceeds the level of the Great Recession, which is what we're calling between 2007 and 2009, which many of you remember, when the unemployment rate peaked at 13.9% in January 2007. Nearly 6 in 10 Latinos, 59% in May, this is almost a year ago, said that they lived in households that have experienced job losses or pay cuts due to the coronavirus outbreak, with a far lower share of the US adults saying the same. So this is what's happening with the parents of our children in our buildings, okay? Let's think about this through the lens of children's health before we go off and think about this with regards to what we can do about it. Between March and July 25th, Black and Latinx children, like their adult counterparts, face more severe impacts from the coronavirus than white individuals. Higher case rates, higher hospitalizations, higher levels of virus-related complications. Latino children were hospitalized for the coronavirus at higher rates, 16.4 per 100,000 people, followed by Black children at 10.5. White children were hospitalized at a rate of 2.1, all right? So 16.4, 10.5, and white children at 2.1. Just to give you an idea of how disparate this is with regards to race and ethnicity. You also have to realize that it's not just about the trauma that these children were feeling on their bodies. They were watching grandparents, uncles, aunts get sick and die without the ability to go visit them. Right? So there's all kinds of trauma that these children are grappling with, all kinds of trauma that they're dealing with, and that we have to show up mightily for. Okay. So what I would like you to do is, in small groups, I want you to think about this. In what ways did my district or school respond to the dual pandemics? Did your district or school only focus on COVID-19, or did they also address racial injustice? How did your district's response signal what was important? That's a tricky question. How did students and families respond to your response? And I want you to be honest, do you feel like you dropped the ball anywhere? Given what we know now, did you drop the ball anywhere? And why does it matter so much how educators responded to and continue to respond to the dual pandemics? Okay. I want you to think about that in your small groups. All right, I'm gonna give you, I know it's a lot much time, but I'm only gonna give you 3 minutes. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for coming back. That was another robust conversation, I could tell. Does anyone want to share something that emerged from your small group? This is a vulnerable slide. I'm asking you to be vulnerable on this one. Does anyone want to share anything that emerged from them compellingly from this particular conversation?
Roderick, I don't mind sharing. This is Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Tech, and you're very familiar with our system. And I'll just put it out there. I thought, and I shared this with our group, I thought we were doing a lot of great things in our district. And our students, though, over the summer spoke out. And I wanted to just link what you said earlier. I think because we're a very diverse district, even St. George's, where you'll say that's our one school that's predominantly white, it has 100 more white students than students of color. So even that's still predominantly pretty diverse. But Del Castle, Howard, we underestimated the trauma our students were enduring. We took for granted that our diversity meant we were welcoming.
Come on.
And that's been the most, I think, eye-opening for us. Even being the superintendent, someone who graduated from Glasgow and really having very strong Black men and women in my own life. If it wasn't for Sandy Cantley, a Black female, I probably wouldn't have gone into administration. I think I took some of that for granted and started to rest in our diversity. And the students were hurting, and they let us know they were hurting. And all of our work had to shift from programs and policies we thought were being impactful to really, really listening to our kids and supporting them from an area and a space that they were at, not where we wanted them to be, but where they were at. And we've learned, these last 7 months have been hard, but I think we've learned a lot, and I think we're on a good trajectory.
Let's give Joe a round of applause. Like, just put some claps. He needs to see your hands. That was one of the bravest, most compelling insights I have heard ever, Joseph. That is just amazing what you just said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Roderick, this is Jackie, and I want to comment on Joe's comment because you and I had a conversation a few minutes ago, and I just want to say to you, you know, many of you have very brave principals who are coming to you with their fears about how they're gonna, how am I gonna lead these conversations in my school with my students, with my teachers, when I don't even know, you know, what we people are feeling. And I just I have to shout out to some of these principals who are going to their superintendents, like Clifton Hayes went to Joe, and who said, we got to do something here. When these kids come back to us after what they've watched on television, we got to have me feel comfortable in having these conversations. And I just can't tell you the work that I've seen taking place with that staff and those kids. And Joe, in your district, I just can't say enough about the courage that it takes to acknowledge it and then to do something about it. So
absolutely, thank you, thank you. Yeah, shouts out to the Votech district. I've had the opportunity to build with the Del Castle folks and the folks at St. George's, doing amazing work. So cheers to you, Joe, for your leadership. You opened up my next slide. So what can our district do to create equity in the time of dual pandemics? So I want you to return to your equity table, and I want you to brainstorm the ways that you addressed equity during the dual pandemics. And I kind of put this in the past and in the present tense because the dual pandemics aren't over. All right, so I want you to fill out the second column, but I also want you to note what changed from the pre-pandemic. And when you're done, we're going to discuss these in small groups. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes to reflect on your own, and then I'm going to give you another 4 minutes to share in groups before we move on. All right, so I'm going to give you 4 minutes. Building during the dual pandemics and continue to do so. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip our share out. And I want us to go to my final point for you today. Well, actually, one of my final points, I have a few. But the title of this whole presentation was creating proactive equity leadership. And can someone just give me an understanding of what you think the difference is between reactive versus proactive leadership? Who wants to give me an example or what that means? Anybody? You all are so kind.
So I can jump in.
Who is this speaking? I'm sorry.
This is Paul. I'm sorry.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah. So for me, to be proactive rather than reactive is to have thought through what our core values around equity are, and to have structures and systems and policies and procedures and whatever other things that we have as educators already in place that already address the issues of equity that we believe in, as opposed to waiting for crisis and responding well. So
Paul, did you sneak into my Dropbox and already look at my slides, Paul?
We've all been doing this a bit. This is our reality.
Good. Great work, Paul. Thank you. Absolutely. Here's some things that I was thinking about. So reactive equity mindset is simply this. And this is, I built this out in my conversations with Mark. It's driven by a fear of what could go wrong in our buildings. You know, one of the ways that I prepared for this was I simply asked Mark, what is the thing that keeps a superintendent up at night? What's the deepest, biggest fears that drive a superintendent to keep them up at night? You should be in bed, but you sit up watching Ozark all night because you're just so worried and just hand wringing, your stomach is all hurting and stuff, okay? As opposed to driven by determination for what is right. And I think that's very important that we move into the direction of what is right as opposed to what could go wrong. Instead of leader putting out fires, the leader puts out fires because they've empowered others to adopt equity visions, all right? Instead of a leader relying on short-term fixes, the leader gets to the root as much as possible. Now, I say as much as possible because you will never get to the full root because schools are just theaters where life's dramas play out. And they create some drama, but really, you know, there's social inequities that surrounding that building that have nothing to do with what you're doing inside of it that are going to show up there regardless. But you do get to the root as much as you can. Focuses on present day outcomes and what is next only, as opposed to focus on how the future will be better due to changed policies and practices. That is the most important thing I think that we need to think about is, and that's why I bolded it. It's not just thinking about practices, but policies, changing policies. That's the only way that we're going to be able to do something. And you all have the power to do that. If I was presenting this to teachers, it would be a very different conversation. But when I was thinking about superintendents and school leaders, you have the power to change policies. And I think that that is one of the big differences. And that's one of the reasons why you can make really big moves for equity for these children. Reactive holds breath till the next hate crime, the next assault, the next graffiti on the locker, the next time the N-word is spray painted somewhere, as opposed to prepares for racial conflict by equipping building leaders with tools to address inequity, not only interpersonally, but structurally and culturally. How do we get this building to be on board in structures and in the cultures, meaning what is normed here? And the funds that you do have, if you have access to funds, you use them to address issues of race, equity, inclusion. I can't tell you how many times people are like, we need to address issues of race, diversity, and inclusion. I cannot stand that. As opposed to prioritizes funding projects and initiatives aimed at centering equity across student differences. Those are two different approaches. We need to address race. No. You need to prioritize equity. I think those are two completely different approaches. One is reactive, one is proactive. One is like race, yeah, I guess we gotta deal with it. As opposed to something that we own and we can do something amazing for, because this is an identity that matters to us. You know how I know? It's because y'all struggle to get rid of it in that opening activity, right? So this is the best part. Let's use your imagining, okay? I want you to imagine, and I want you to just stretch yourself. What would a proactive equity vision for the future look like? So on the far right of the column, I want you to focus on moving equity forward. And I want you to keep in mind the dual pandemics, but I want you to try to imagine it, imagine forward, all right? And if some of you, if these are the things that I think are some of the most important domains, but you can add other things if you like. But I want you to at least focus on at least 3 of these that you really think are the most important for you to focus on. Fill out as many as you can, and I'm going to give you I'm only going to give you 3 minutes to work on it, and I'm going to give you another 5 minutes to discuss. I know that our time is limited, so just focus on just 3 if you can. And thank you so much for staying. Stay in that inquiry space. I'm going to send you to your rooms. I'm actually, I think I'll keep the rooms as they are. Thank you all. Push each other, build ideas. Well, thank you all so much. It's good to see you back. Another time, I know I was cutting you short, but I wanted you to have the opportunity to just think about this stuff in community with each other. I wanted you to come away with 3 areas that you might want to begin with. And I wanted to give folks an opportunity to share. And I want to challenge at least 2 people who have not shared yet to think about 3 domains that are most important for you. How will you begin? How will you continue? How will you recommit to equity? So I challenge 2 people who haven't shared yet to share.
So we can begin with making sure that equity is incorporated in our mission and vision for the coming years as we begin to plan for next year or any changes in policy that we implement this year. Just making sure that there's always a equity component in any updates and changes that we make. Incorporating the community into a lot of the decisions that we're making and getting their input, not just piloting different things, but actually championing the equity work that we're doing here throughout the district, making sure everyone is on board, continue to eliminate any barriers that we foresee, and be okay with having everyone share in that responsibility of eliminating those barriers and making.
Thank you so much for your insight. And I didn't put mission and vision on there because I always find that sometimes that stuff it ekes into the vision, but sometimes it doesn't trickle down to some of those domains. So I just put the domains, not the vision. But you're just like put that in those domains, in that equity, in that vision. And I think it's important to do so because you can measure every single thing that you do in your buildings against what you have stated is important in your vision. So thank you so much. I want to challenge one other person to share who has not shared yet.
Roger, this is Jay. Indian
Hey
River,
Jay, thank you.
One of the things we kind of talked about is connecting with the community. So I think pre-pandemics, many of us were able to connect well with community groups and outreach and our various ways of communicating. But, we've not been able to do that, whether it's, social distancing or what have you. But we found that the best way to learn about what our community is feeling is to go into their environment, whether it's a church group, it's a Rotary, just any civic organization. We found that our community is more willing to share and be open with the needs and the wants and just the overall feelings of the families. So we've tried to get back to that as our communities have opened back up, and that's been really helpful. And we want to try to continue that, get back to where we were, but improve upon that and even get into angles of our communities where we weren't able to connect before. And if we can hear from them, they're gonna, I really do feel the community and the families and students are gonna offer us the greatest insight of how we can help and what we know and don't know about how they're feeling.
Fantastic, Jay. Thank you so much. Instead of like reaching out and inviting community partnerships, how do we foster them intentionally? A lot of folks say, well, I emailed them, I put a flyer. No, that's not, no. You need to foster those relationships. It's a different kind of work. Thank you so much. Friends, this is our closing. And as an educator, I always like to revisit all that we've accomplished so that you can leave here and go to your Panera and go get your Casapula sub. You can tell what I want for lunch, right? Look at all that we've accomplished. How do we intentionally, unintentionally create inequitable learning opportunities for students? We've addressed this. What role do the dual pandemics play in exacerbating inequity occurring in my schools or workplace? What can we do to activate equity proactively instead of reactively? We have addressed these 3 questions. Do you think that we've done so? Give me a thumbs up if you think so. Thank you. I see thumbs. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Maji. All right. Look at all that we've done in our learning objectives. A deeper understanding of the role race, culture, and other identities play in affording us privilege and or penalty. We've talked about that. An understanding of what equity is and how it shows up in various facets of our schools. We've talked about 10 facets, and including mission and vision, which my friend closed us with. We've grappled with an understanding of the dual pandemics and how these have furthered the trauma facing ethnically and racially marginalized students, their families, and staff. We've built deeper community. Hopefully you've met some new people or fostered deeper relationships with people. Hopefully you're leaving with an understanding of reactive versus proactive equity mindsets. I hope that you're leaving with a working document for advancing a proactive equity across schooling domains. And I hope that you're leaving with some recommended books to understand race and equity in society and schools. And you're like, wait, Rod, you haven't done that last one. You're right, here it is, bam. All right, I'm prepared for you. Not only am I giving you the titles, I'm showing you what the books look like. Go get your coins together and get some of these books, all right? One of my first and favorite books, this is Dave Santor's, I know he loves this one, Whistling Vivaldi. I told him to get that book and he's like, Rod, I love that book. So Whistling Vivaldi is a great, great book to think about the ways that race and stereotypes intersect. All right, yeah, Carolyn, thank you. People love Whistling Vivaldi, that's Claude Steele, psychologist out of Stanford. All right, if you're interested in kind of whiteness and race talk So you want to talk about race, I recommend that one as opposed to Robin DiAngelo's, because Ijeoma is a woman of color. And I think that we should prioritize focusing on folks of color within these conversations. The New Jim Crow, if you want to go deep, I think that is a fantastic read to understand the ways that race operates within systems. If you want to go even deeper into one of the forefathers of understanding race, go to Derek Bell, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, The Permanence of Racism. Okay, we continue to drink from wells that Derek Bell dug for us at Harvard many years ago. All right, other books. These are some books I recommend for teaching and school leadership. One of my favorites is The Far Left, Rich Milner's book on Start Where You Are But Don't Stay There. It's now in its 2nd edition. I recommend that book. Rich is also one of my mentors, but I don't get a dime from recommending his books to people, but go ahead for that. Tyrone Howard's is in a 2nd edition too, Closing the Achievement Gap in America's Classrooms. The book in the middle, 5 Practices for Equity-Focused School Leadership. We've been waiting for that book for years. That's George Steele Harris, Mark Gooden, Gretchen, and Sharon. That book has not even been released yet. It's coming out in July, so check that one out. Dave DeMatthews down at UTexas, brilliant thinker about social justice. Gary Howard's work, We Can't Teach What We Don't Know. That is where I get the opening activity from. Gary Howard is an amazing white ally, brilliant theorist. And then Mohammed Khalifa's Culturally Responsive School Leadership. If any of you are a little bit more progressive and a little bit more radical, I recommend these 4 books. Bettina Love's book, We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching in the Pursuit of Educational Freedom is the hottest book right now in the field. Another kind of public education, Patricia Hill Collins. I love that book if you're more of a sociological thinker. The Future is Black is actually a book that I have a chapter in by Carl Grant, Ashley Woodson, and Michael Dumas. Very theoretical. The book there, Rosa Rivera McCutcheon's book, is not even released yet. It's coming out in July, but I've been waiting for this book for a long time. Radical Care, Leading for Justice in Urban Schools. And lastly, Jeff Duncan Andrade and Ernest Morell's The Art of Critical Pedagogy. That is an oldie but goodie. That is another great book. So those are some books that I'd recommend that you check out. Friends, it has been an honor to present for you and with you and share space with you. I want to thank you so much for your time. Email me if you have any questions about any of this. So that is our time. We are ending 1 minute early. It's been an honor to work with you all. Thank you so much.
Rod, thank you. This was a fantastic session, thought-provoking, engaging. I could go on and on, but I think the chat box says it all from the participants who were involved today. So thank you. We look forward to additional partnerships with you through UD, Dazzle specifically continuing to work with you, and you working with other school districts beyond some of those you just mentioned. So thank you, Rod. Fantastic presentation today. To all of the participants, this presentation has been recorded. We will be posting it on the Schoology page, and our next study council is Friday, April 30th. We're going to be focusing on legislation, and it looks like we are going to have at least Tizzy Lockman, Laura Sturgeon, Kim Williams, and possibly some others joining us. We're working on that agenda and the activities that will equal action. So more to come on it. But thank you, everyone, for your involvement today. Have a wonderful afternoon and weekend ahead. Take care.